This week the students began preparing our replacement engine to go back into the Yukon, and we'll see if they've got that misfire straightened out on that S10. Thanks for tuning in. The students are now ready to start transferring the accessories from the old engine from the Yukon onto the replacement engine. We need to remove the clutch fan from our replacement engine. Since we don't have the correct spanner that fits into the holes for the water pump pulley, we're going to simply put 2 bolts into the holes, and then we'll be able to use our fan removal tools. So he's going to take and put the holder in there. There we go. Looks like it's loose, and you can take the tools out of the way, hold the pulley, spin the fan off, and there we go. Alright, take those bolts out, and you can see the holes that are there where a normal spanner would go, but if you don't have that, that's just an easy way that you can do it. The original Yukon engine is a drive-by-wire, which means it doesn't use throttle cables. The engine we're replacing it with does have cables for the throttle. So what we're going to be doing is not only replacing the throttle body, but we also are going to have to replace the entire plenum because there are connectors and vacuum lines that are not the same for the replacement engine. So we're going to transfer the fuel rails as well as the plenum. Alright, the injector rails are loose from both of the engines, so we're going to remove the injectors along with the rail. Then they'll get busy on taking the plenums loose and swapping them.
Now with the fuel rails out of the way, we're removing the intake plenums. Our replacement engine has 2 broken exhaust bolts, so we need to remove the manifolds to replace it.
Before we put on the new gaskets in the plenum, we're going to vacuum out all of this trash so we're less likely to have it go down into the engine. Now in a lot of cases you would take a blowgun and blow all that clean, stuff rags in the holes, but since we do have a good shop vac, it's safer to vacuum all that out. So what they're doing now is taking rags and getting them pushed down into the intakes really well. So then we can use a gasket scraper to clean up all of that, the rest of the debris, vacuum it out, then we'll be ready to put the plenum on. As is often the case with used engines, sometimes we see broken fasteners or components, and this engine was no exception. On the left-hand side of the engine there were 2 broken exhaust bolts on it, so we had to remove the exhaust manifold so we can make those repairs, and we're going to install new hardware on that side. So we decided to do the same thing with this side, thinking that okay, they're probably going to break soon anyway, and we don't want to have the customer come back with a broken exhaust bolt on something we had just finished or fixed. So while removing this, one of the bolt heads broke on this side as well. But we were very quick to notice something that I want to share with you is why this bolt actually broke. This is the bolt head that broke off the right side of the engine, and if you can see here, hopefully you can make this out, there's a line right there almost in the very center of this fastener, and this side here is dirty while this side is clean. So what that tells us is this thing was already cracked for some time, and that's how this ended up getting kind of dirty and rusted in there. And then when we went to take it off, we finished breaking it off the rest of the way. So this definitely is a fastener that was going to fail over time, maybe within a few days of us putting it back together, and because of heat and expansion, the difference between the aluminum and the steel, it was probably going to break off very quickly and then develop an exhaust leak. This is the exhaust stud on the right hand side where the bolt head had broken off that I just showed you. This one's going to be pretty easy to get out. We'll be able to put some heat onto the head around the stud and use some locking pliers to spin that out, and then we'll be able to reinstall this manifold with new hardware. By contrast, these two on the left hand side are going to be a little more difficult to repair. As you can see, both of them have broken just slightly below flush, so that's going to make it a little more difficult to get out. Drilling would be what most people would do right away. However, for me, that's a last resort. There are a couple of other tricks that we can use to hopefully get these out, and you will be probably seeing us use almost every technique available to remove these, but it does obviously need to be taken care of. You can see that this exhaust had been leaking for quite some time, which is evident by the staining there around the head. The rest of them are pretty clean, but this is because that bolt had broken. If the bolts hadn't broken but we were still seeing this stain, then we would want to take a look at the exhaust manifold for possibly being warped, or maybe the bolts were beginning to break. But anyway, that would have been a sign for us to check out something a little further before we put this engine back in the vehicle. We're ready to take off this broken stud, so the first thing we're going to do is apply some heat around the stud, and then we'll begin to remove it. So the nice thing is I can get all the way around it. Sometimes when you're heating some of these things, you can only get maybe halfway and sometimes less. This one I can actually get the heat all the way around it. Not worry about the plug, it's not going to catch on fire anyway, but we're going to be replacing the plug. It's kind of silly to put another engine in it without replacing the spark plug, especially since it's already out. A lot easier to get to. Now, it doesn't always work the first time, like I said, with aluminum, but in some cases it does. So now we're going to take and now you're going to have to, it's alright, careful with that. You got to undo it. Get another bite, there you go. Keep going back and forth with it. Feels pretty good? Yeah. Alright, keep getting a bite on it, or get another bite on it. I know it's difficult to see that the stud is actually turning, but he can see it, and we know that the pliers are not slipping around the stud. It is actually coming out, which is good. We're going to maintain the structural integrity of the threads, which is our goal. Alright, we're going to apply the heat a little more. Now that it's cooled down, that thing is starting to constrict around it again, which means that it could actually end up breaking off. Even though he's got a couple of good turns out of it, it could break on us. Now that we know it's moving, we don't want to screw that up. So we'll heat it again. Better? Yeah. Also, could have sprayed a little penetrating oil in there, and that probably would have used it as well, but I'm a big fan of heating them up. They come out so much easier that way. And if we did take that spark plug out, the second one back, or third one back from the front, he would have be able to move it more, but we're not in a big hurry. But he's seeing more than anyone else here how the importance of making sure that those pliers are nice and tight. So doing it this way, he doesn't have to worry about clamping it so much. But you still need to do the back and forth just like he's doing. With the broken fastener out, we can see that the threads are in good shape, which means the threads in the head are in good shape as well.
In order to remove the power steering pump bracket, we need to remove the power steering pump pulley.
Dylan's installing the pulley remover. Most manufacturers now put holes in the pulley so that you can have access to the bolts behind them, but this one doesn't have it, so the pulley does need to be removed. Here the students are removing some of the bracketry that supports the accessories. This is the bracket that supports the air conditioning compressor. Then they're going to change it over to our replacement engine and then get busy with the rest of the brackets. With the intake cleaned up, Kevin's removing the rags from the intake ports in preparation of putting on our plenum. Here Kevin is installing our new intake plenum gaskets.
With the surfaces clean and our new gaskets, the plenum is ready to go on.
With our torque specification and our sequence here, Kevin will begin torquing the plenum. He's doing this in 2 steps, begin with 44 inch-pounds and then ending up with 89 inch-pounds.
Michael, be on bench. All right.
Six is first, Eric.
What's up, bud? That's 8. I'm using a stud welder to weld pins into this hood to fix the dent.
The studs will allow him to use a dent puller so he can easily pull the dent back straight. Once he's got it completely pulled out and ground down, he'll finish it up with a thin coat of filler. As you can see, this engine is clearly running fine. It came to us with a diagnosis from a local shop that it needed a timing chain replacement. It had a cylinder 5 misfire. The students checked out cylinder 5 by doing a compression test last week, if you saw that, and it passed mechanically. So by replacing the plugs, wires, and cap and rotor, the engine is now running sound. So either there's a technician out there locally who doesn't know how to diagnose a misfire, or he was trying to get the customer to pay for a service that it really didn't need. Next time on Bulldog Builds, we'll have more of that Yukon engine back together. We have a Jeep come in with some misfire and evap codes we need to check out. And we'll get you introduced to some of the Auto Ones as they get a little bit of shop time. See you next week.